Welcome to the Choral Connection, a series of interviews with musicians with whom Maestro Harold Rosenbaum has collaborated over his 47-year international conducting career. We hope you are inspired by their artistry and the stories they have to tell. For more about the series, please visit www.haroldrosenbaum.com.
Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm very happy to have as my guest one of America's greatest composers, Aaron Jay Kernis, who is a Pulitzer Prize and Grammy Award winner. He serves as a member of the Yale School of Music faculty. Mr. Kernis spent 15 years as a music advisor to the Minnesota Orchestra and as director of the Minnesota Orchestra's Composers Institute, and is currently the workshop director of the Nashville Symphony Composer Lab. He has received many awards and honors throughout his 35-year career, which you can, of course, read about online. Aaron studied with John Adams, Charles Warren, Morton Subotnick, and Bernard Rands, and also Jacob Druckmann. His wide range of teachers helps to define his eclectic musical style that blends minimalism with post-romanticism. Mr. Kernis found immediate success as a composer when his work Dream of the Morning Sky was premiered in 1983 by the New York Philharmonic with Zubin Mehta conducting. He was only 23 at the time, but won unanimous praise for an incident that took place. In an open rehearsal in front of an audience, Zubin Mehta stopped the orchestra to complain loudly about the vagueness of the score. Rather than being cowed by the strong-willed conductor, Aaron simply replied, "Just read what's there." The audience applauded young Kernis for sticking up for his work, and within weeks, the story received national attention. And I'll ask him more about that a little bit later. While still in his 20s, he was signed by one of the top music publishers. By his 30s, he was signed to a 5-year exclusive contract with a major record label, and he won the Pulitzer Prize. Not long after turning 40, he received the University of Louisville's Grawemeyer Award, which is the single largest American award for composers. He was at the top of his game, so to speak, but at the same time he was pursuing his craft and being successful at it, he decided to devote a significant part of his life to being a mentor to younger composers and help them attain the same kind of achievements that he has had. He founded the Minnesota Orchestra Composers Institute, one of the premier programs for nurturing emerging talent, and oversaw its activities for over a decade. To this day, he's on the faculty of the Yale School of Music, whose successful composer alumni nowadays seem ubiquitous. Mr. Kernis' style has been described as having neo-romantic intensity with exuberant imagination, and he has been praised by the New York Times for his fearless originality and powerful voice. And there's much more, but let me just begin by saying welcome and asking you, because I'm very interested also in mentoring young composers, ask you about your directorship of the Minnesota Orchestra's Composer Institute and Nashville director of the Nashville Symphony Composers Lab, what that entailed, why you founded it, what have you achieved, what has it achieved, etc.
Yeah. Great. Nice to be here.
Thank you.
So about mentoring, it really honestly all came about because I felt so wonderfully mentored by my teachers, and especially by Jacob Druckmann. And in fact, because of his involvement with the New York Philharmonic in the early 80s, that brought about the performance of my first big orchestra piece and the situation you mentioned. And that was that was a very important point in my life and my musical life, my career, all that. And so when I was presented with an opportunity to work with a great orchestra, with Minnesota Orchestra, and to work on such a program, it was really Jacob's example as a mentor that fueled me and fueled my excitement and devotion to trying to help young composers in the orchestral world as much as possible. And since the Minnesota Orchestra program began, while there were other programs like the ACO reading program as well, these kind of opportunities have really exploded around the U.S. And there's been a since the beginning of that program, there's been a great ability for young composers to learn to really write well for the orchestra and to be heard. So that's been very exciting and gratifying to see.
So the orchestra has readings of their works, and
Exactly, but not only readings. I mean, in Minnesota, the no, I stopped being in Minnesota a number of years ago. I forget how many already, probably like 7 years ago, and since then has moved on to work with the Nashville Symphony, and their conductor Giancarlo Guerrero and I met while he was assistant conductor in Minnesota. So when he moved on to Nashville, he wanted to create a similar but much more small scaled, much more intimately scaled program. In Minnesota, one of the unique things about the program is not only were there, readings and actually a performance of the works, usually 7 or 8 composers, but also five solid days of seminars and mentoring sessions and information, both business and musical kind of sessions. So a really comprehensive experience of what we called an immersion into the orchestral world.
and it's each orchestra has to come up with the money to do this. It's not cheap. You have to have all these professional players with an extra program other than the concerts and rehearsals leading up to
Well,
it.
the one of the very great things is that to a great extent, the people that came in, the professionals, the mentors, the business professionals, all that, came in and often donated their services or did at a very reasonable rate, and provided that the orchestra could, um, you know, deal with transportation and accommodation and all that, and just on the ground kind of expenses. People have been very generous with their time, and it's usually, I think orchestras started to discover they could do this by using extra services, um, rather than adding services, and many of them now have added this as part of their yearly schedule, actually.
Very nice. Is this something similar to what David Felder and June in Buffalo does? Do you know that program?
I do. Juno Buffalo, from my experience, and I don't know if it's changed in the last number of years. And of course, there are performances involved with that with players up there, but it's a bit different because he brings in a pretty strong number of professional composers that come in and teach master classes and teach private lessons and have readings of smaller works, smaller ensemble readings and performances, smaller ensemble works. So it's more like that's more like a composer festival,
Mm-hmm.
With readings and performances. But in the orchestral realm, it's the orchestral reading that's the primary event, and then all of these satellite events around it to create context and create to give as much information as possible.
I've been talking to Melinda Wagner about the possibility of my professional choir coming to Juilliard to be a reading chorus. And
Yeah, it's a great idea.
it's important for choral composers of choral music too, young composers, to be involved with something like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, in Minnesota also, and I don't know if this is going on, but for a long time, parallel with this program, Philip Brunel had a reading programs, and there were reading programs for at least a number of years. I've been less aware of them in the last few years. I haven't seen call for scores coming from them lately from Minnesota. So I'm sure that this is an area where you'll know more than I lately about
Yeah.
what's going on in terms of choral training for young composers.
I'm interested in what you said when you said, Jacob Druckmann was a mentor, but how was he more of a mentor than the other 4 composers you studied with?
Well, the with my other teachers, we work together weekly on composition lessons, that kind of thing. But because of Jacob's involvement with the New York Philharmonic, he well, there were a number of things. That was one. He was composer in residence with the New York Philharmonic, and he just, I felt so fortunate to have this experience through his, that this program existed, to have a few works read. And at that time, 1983, it was the start of a multi-year series of festivals at the Philharmonic called the Horizons Festival, where over 1 or 2 weeks, a whole slew of new orchestra works were performed. It was really, I think, nothing quite like it ever in the U.S. And as part of that, the first year, there were these readings of new works, of which mine was part. And also, during that time and after, I worked as a proofreader for Jacob, and of his orchestral parts and things like that. And so I was really seeing his work from the inside. I was seeing through this experience with the New York Philharmonic, the orchestral world from the inside for the first time. And, this kind of multi-tiered situation really, I mean, I loved writing for orchestra in the first place, but it really kind of, I felt right in the middle of it for a short time, and that really fueled me to sort of do the same for young composers.
Now, Mr. Druckmann, if I remember correctly, I met him once or twice, a very nice man, and he was on my board of advisors for decades ago.
Yep.
He's not with us anymore.
No, he isn't, no.
Now his son is a percussionist, right?
Yes, Daniel, yeah.
Daniel, is he the percussionist with the New York Philharmonic?
He is, yeah.
And did he now getting to the piece you wrote for me when I commissioned, I'll get to that in a moment, but I just thought of it now, because the piece you wrote for my choir, the New York Virtuoso Singers, has chorus and percussion, or clapping.
Clapping.
A lot of clapping.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if Daniel, through Jacob, influenced the clapping, or is that not really an influence?
Not directly, but I did work with, I mean, Daniel's a wonderful percussionist and wonderful player, and certainly saw him, as a young man performing with New York New Music Ensemble and around New York, and I've always loved writing for percussion. So.
Oh, great. Well, I looked at the score. I dredged it up. I don't mean dredged it up. I looked at my file. And well, let me explain to everybody that I don't know, about 8 years ago, I commissioned 25 of America's leading composers to write short choral pieces for the 25th anniversary of my professional choir. And you wrote a wonderful piece called Song of You. And here it is.
There you go.
So I was just looking today, because it does say, the clapping can be, here's my blurriness now with my eyes, for one or more chorus members or percussionists. That's very practical, because if you have a chorus singing this without music stands, it gets really difficult.
It really does. It really does. And that was a challenge. Probably when I started, I thought, I'm going to have clapping, and I don't want to bother you with hiring extra people. And then how do people clap and sing and hold their music? You probably have to do it with one person holding the music and the person next to it looking on in that way, or having music stands, which is another problem.
Yeah, but I think you asked me, and I said we're going to each have music stands, but then you also decided, which was really interesting to me and fun, not to sit back and listen to the premiere, but rather take part of the clapping in the performance.
That's right. Yeah, that was fun.
You would rather have had that kind of fun rather than the satisfaction, or maybe your composer's nerves are, get all haywire when they sit there and listen to a premiere?
No, I think it may be that it needed a little, the sound of the clapping needed a little beefing up within the group, or it's always fun to be involved. And when I was throughout high school, middle school, that I was a choral singer, so I was used to being up there, and that was probably a way of reclaiming my old feeling of being a choral singer.
Yeah, that's great. Um, One thing I have found over the years, even with professionals, uh, they can sing everything so accurately, no matter how difficult the music is. But when they start clapping, I've had to work extra hard to get them to be together. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
witnessed that.
No, I didn't know that, but yeah, yeah.
It's really something. Hi guys, let's do boom together. It's so hard for them to do. And also,
Interesting.
something I also learned rather recently from my contractor, Nancy Wirch. She said, Harold, whistling is so hard for professional singers to do. She said, if you encourage composers, because I've gotten not a lot, a few pieces with whistling, and she said, encourage them to have an alternate sound. Isn't that interesting? I don't
I
quite,
had no idea. Yeah.
I had no idea
I'd
either.
be, I'm surprised at that.
I know.
What is it? Just a different? I mean, clearly it's a different mechanism from singing, but
Yeah.
why? What makes it so difficult for choral singers?
I don't know. I forget what she said. She just said it is a different technique. Yes,
Yeah,
it's way up here, and
well, that's true.
and some people just can't do it. I mean,
Oh, that's very true. Yeah,
yeah, just like some singers can't roll R's. They literally cannot roll R's,
yeah.
and it's tough to sing, in German or with Peter Pears singing with beautiful rolled R's without if you can't do it. But anyway, um,
And then in Spanish, no less. So
yeah, I mean, it's, Perro and I can't roll R's, but P-E-R-O and P-E-R-R, the sound O is are completely two different words.
yeah.
Um, so exactly, I mean, it was at the spur of the moment, but when you said in front of, to Zubin Mehta, just read what's there. I mean, what did you actually mean? Were you really annoyed, or were you just worried that he wasn't doing what you intended? How did it come out, and did you regret saying that, or just the opposite?
No, no. I mean, when that happened, really, it was quite simple that that I was being berated for something that would be solved by just rehearsing and playing the music. Very simple. So
Well, had he not been doing that till now? I mean, till then, did he already start rehearsing it and stopped and said that?
yeah, he took the opportunity during the reading session to ask questions and make comments, and some of them were fair questions and some of them were kind of a little hot-headed, and I just you know tried to keep my cool and just
Yeah, stood
act
up.
professionally and defend the music actually.
And was Zubin the one? Because you mentioned the 2 week span for the Horizons when they had a lot of new works. Was he the one in charge of that and conducting all those pieces?
No, well, there were various conductors,
Right.
and I'm sure he conducted at least one other concert. I can't remember exactly, but there were many guest conductors. Yeah.
So I want to go back. You studied with John Adams. He's one of the five teachers, and then Charles Warren. Now I can't think of a wider span of styles, and I
Yeah.
can't create a contrast in those two. Obviously, you got something out of, or a lot out of each person. But was
Yeah,
it?
and they were right next to each other because I studied with John when he was just before his career hit, before his position with the San Francisco Symphony started. And I only spent a year in San Francisco and then transferred to Manhattan School, where when I was I think 19 and 20, studied for a year with Charles, and then worked with Elias Tenenbaum after that for 2 years. And so you know my sense was, I mean, style really never came into it. I mean, of course they're very different composers, very different sensibilities, personalities, um, but they were wonderful teachers and each had something you know to impart very much. And I think Charles must have intuited that I had not come to him to study the 12-tone technique. Um, and so we worked on other things.
like like what? I mean, I do know his some of his early works. I did a concert of his music, and he made an arrangement. Let me think. He made an arrangement of a macho movement of a mass or something.
Yeah, he was devoted to
That's cat, I think it was.
early music and arrangements of early music, and that was a very important part of his musical thinking. And uh, um, you know, just we as with any teacher, we worked on what I was working on, and I was actually vacillating between writing atonal pieces and writing minimal pieces.
Mhm.
So and I was kind of, you know, it was a nascent version of, you know, my frequent stylistic eclecticism, which kind of calmed down lately.
Mhm.
But as I said, my teachers were all really different. I've always been interested in many kinds of music, many styles, many approaches, and the kind of panorama of teachers I've had really reflects my interests and the breadth of American music.
Right. Wonderful. I don't want to keep you too long, but I just one or two more things to ask you. Um, I mean, most composers um, I have found will write for chorus in an easier style, so that than their orchestral music, let's say,
Yeah,
so that high school and college choirs can do that. I have a whole bunch of your music, and I think maybe "Song of You," which you wrote for me, is more difficult than a lot of the others. I mean, it's still quite singable, but it's frenzied in a wonderful sense.
yeah, it is, Francie. Yeah, it is quite fast, and I was very interested. That was a later manifestation of an interest I had in whirling dervishes and in music that established a real head of steam. And in my earlier ecstatic meditations, there's one movement that also develops this kind of whirling quality within a somewhat more consonant uh, uh, context.
and
Uh,
yeah, that
and you know, I think because I was a choral singer, and because I have a number of works that are easier to sing, in more recent years, the choral work I've written tends to be quite a bit more chromatic and more dense harmonically.
mhm.
And I enjoy writing music that's more challenging. Whether people enjoy singing it, I can't tell you. I'm actually in the middle of a big new choral work right now, with orchestra, with a smaller orchestra, and the uh, the writing is varies again a great deal between very tonal, very consonant, and quite chromatic. So it's really ranging the gamut.
Well, the thing is, there are probably thousands of choirs in this country who can do very tough music. I mean,
Yeah,
there are college choirs that are professional level. It's amazing.
it
So
really is. Yeah,
that's great. Um, and one more thing, I think it's very smart. It's a very smart thing to do to put extensive dynamic and expression marks into your scores. As some composers are reluctant for some reason. Conductors and singers do appreciate those markings. The one thing I noticed, which I've also noticed in virtually all composers' scores, and I've gotten literally, without exaggeration, over 12,500 unpublished choral scores from composers over the last
wow,
40.
yeah,
Um, I've noticed that virtually no composers put breath marks in. You put some, and then there are other places where you leave it to us conductors. I'm wondering what the philosophy is about that. Like, why you don't put every breath mark in that you think should be there.
yeah. So I rely a certain amount on the punctuation of the text.
Mhm.
That if there's a comma, I generally expect a breath or a breath within a couple of phrases, um, and tend to only include a breath mark where I feel it's not obvious or where it's a major moment for everybody, where they have to be aware of that together. But yeah, I tend to, yeah, I would feel it would be too,
Composing?
it would be add too many extra markings, actually. That's part of it, that I do want to leave enough room for
Right.
the musicians not to be fully encumbered by too many extra notations. And already my dynamics, it's true, are fairly detailed. And even that, even I often wonder, is that what's too much, what's not enough? That constant question.
I don't think it's too much because very often when there's let's say there's a crescendo from a mezzo forte, but there's no forte at the end of the crescendo, no marking of any kind, singers will ask, they'll ask how much should we crescendo. So I
Yeah.
think you're doing a good thing by putting those in.
In this newer piece, which I haven't marked the dynamics yet, but I'm generally thinking to give longer phrases one dynamic,
Hmm.
uh, and letting the conductor and the chorus kind of take the cue from what's happening around them, rather than spelling every single thing out. But it's always, it's adding dynamics is one of the most complex. It's like the thing I leave for the very end because it's the most tedious thing to do. And after the notes and after all the notations and all that, and I can't decide whether that makes it more tedious, the fact that I leave it for to the end, or once the whole shape of the piece is done, is the time for me to then start adding all those details.
Well, the one thing interesting about this whole conversation about breath marks and expression marks is, there are most conductors, like high school conductors. Well, I mean, there are fabulous high school conductors. My daughter is one of them. But I mean, anybody who chooses to do any of your music, which is not all that simple, it seems to me would have a fair amount of knowledge and um, about works of that stature and that complexity, so that they would know or have a feeling of what they want to do with it.
Yeah,
In other words, so it sort of works out that way. I'm not being clear, but it sort of works out.
it's nice to have recordings, other recordings that people can hear, and it's always amused me and pleased me that probably my most popular choral piece, I Cannot Dance, O Lord, is, from a metrical point of view, very challenging, but because it's so exciting to sing and because it has so much energy, that choirs all over the world have taken that challenge and used it as competition showpiece, and there are so many medium and slow and sustained choral works that to have something that really builds up this head of energy seems to be very exciting for choirs. So they take on the challenge and enjoy it.
Great, wonderful. I just want to show people watching, no matter how many markings are there, it's conductors like me will put these markings in to, like triangle means a dotted quarter and vertical means quarter, and it helps me. I remember Bob Spana. Bob Spana came off the stage once. I was waiting backstage because I trained my singers for John Adams's Death of Klinghoffer and also Death of Klinghoffer, and what's the other one?
You mean El Nino or
No, before El Nino.
harmonium?
No, Nixon in China.
Oh, Nixon. Oh, yeah.
He comes off the stage, with a smile, and he comes up to me right before he brought me on for a bow, and he just went right into my face. This piece has, and I won't use this expletive, 2,400 meter changes. And then he puts his smile on and he goes back on stage.
Right.
He handled it
Yeah,
very.
that's a lot of work.
I know.
Well, it's a little easier in a 3-minute choral piece to have a lot of meter changes, and then you go on to something that's in 4/4.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, Aaron, it's been great, and keep up the great work. And who are you writing this new choral piece and orchestra piece for?
So this is an interesting project because it was initially commissioned by the Yale School of Cantorum to do as a collaboration with the Juilliard 415 Baroque Orchestra.
Hmm.
So I'm actually writing specifically for period, actually it's a classical orchestra in this case, not a Baroque orchestra. So for period instruments. And also the next group to do it will be the San Francisco Philharmonia Baroque. They're a co-commissioner in it as well. So I'm very excited about that.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add before we go?
No, it's just really nice to see you. It's been a long time, and I'm delighted that you're doing this, during the pandemic where more people need to see each other and stay involved, and that you're doing that also through your teaching online and your classes online. So I think that's really, really admirable, really
Well, thank you.
nice way to stay engaged.
Yes, thank you so much. Good luck with everything.
Yeah, you too. Take
Okay,
care. Great to see you. Bye.